Well, welcome back to another build. I finally got my hands on a Pug Twisty. So I'm going to make the standard Pug Twisty, but I'm going to do some added features which I shall talk about later on. But the first thing we've got to do is we're going to build the fuselage, and it's a pretty square, pretty simple fuselage, and I'm going to take you through those steps bit by bit. Okay, so here's all the bits you're going to need in the kit. I've just laid them all out. You can freeze frame this. I might freeze frame this for you, but literally that's what you're looking to be in your kit. The only other thing you don't see, that's the plans for the wings, which we're going to have to iron out just to get rid of these creases. Okay, so the first few things we're going to need for the fuselage are these two fuselage sides and these two ply formers that go on the inside. Now, little tip, use a nice sharp knife just to cut out the locations on the laser cutting. My advice for this is, although these are superbly cut by Angel Wing Designs, I personally would use a slightly bigger knife. So just cut these out, and then what we need to do is just clean up any little deviations there are from where the laser burning is, but don't overdo it. So we need that, and those two. Little top tip, when you're actually just sanding this up, and we're just taking off those little nuggets from the laser cutting, this, just support this just here. So just remember where any forces are going to go. And that particularly, because that's where your servo is going to go. Okay, so we are going to be, remember we've got a left and a right, so we're going to be gluing that into there like so. Now I'm going to use alphatic resin. If you find out the torque rod that goes across the centre, just to give you an idea, that one is just under one, it's 167 in length. When you've got yours glued down, don't actually leave this in place, but if you just pop that in there like so and then clamp it, then you'll know you're going to get that accurately in place. Okay, so we've got our two fuselage sides with the plates on, and the next thing we're going to need is we're going to need this set, which again is in ply. Got to cut these out. My advice is I cut the middle one out first because that's the weakest one. I'll cut those out and then just give them a clean up, and then we're going to mount these to the side of the fuselage. Okay, here are our four plates. Now the thing to remember, the little hole goes at the bottom there, and also this little hole here goes at the bottom here, so it's important to get that right. Now the other thing is, this is not a tapered fuselage, it's a square fuselage, so we can actually just pop these in like so. Just get a set square in there, make sure they're nice and square, and then we can glue those in place. And I'm going to use Sino on there just to hold those in place. I'm going to tack them. I'm going to tack all these four in place. Okay, one side glued. So the idea is we can now rotate that onto there like so, and these will glue onto here like so. So just make sure that it's all sitting down nicely on the bench like so. You can, if you wanted to, pop a little clamp on here just to make sure it's all in place. And then when I'm happy with that, I'm just going to add a little bit of, tack a little bit of glue just on the edge, just to hold it, tack it in place like so. And I'm going to get the front one, making sure that it's sat down square, I'm just going to tack this one here, like so. So we've done our basic fuselage. What you want to do is just have a feel round, make sure that you haven't got any glue or the formers are standing just a little bit proud. Sometimes you get a little bit of glue's wicked out, so that's fine. So what we're going to need now is this set of sheets here, and the first bit we're going to do is we are going to do the bottom sheeting, which we're going to need 3 of these, and then this small one, the slightly bigger of the 2 small ones here, which I'm now going to cut out, just clean them up, and then we're going to glue that to here. Good idea to cut them out and actually just fit them across, just to make sure that you've got all the bits in the right place. Okay, I'm just going to add this sheeting now. I'm going to use alphatic resin, purely for my own health reasons. I always like to try and not use super glue wherever possible. So now I'm going to add these. You can either pin these, or if you want to, you can actually tape them down. One little tip: when you're actually adding the pins, don't put the pins directly down, put the pins down at, say, like a 30-degree angle. That force helps to keep that area pushed down. So we have our primary covering, top and bottom, done. That's just going off. The next thing you're going to need to find is you're going to need to cut all of these out, which is for your nose block. So there's all my bits. Now just remember, they have a specific shape, and you've got to get a shape round the right way. Now, gluing these together, my advice: don't use Sino. The reason we don't use Sino is it sets as quite a hard glue, and if you get a hard spot on here, it's going to be very difficult to sand because the wood is softer and you'll end up with a raised edge. So I'm going to use Superfatic, but you can also use a wood glue like Gorilla Glue, wood glue, or something like that. So I'm now going to glue all these together, clamp them, and just make sure that when you've got them all together, sit them down so you've got a nice fitted edge. So in other words, a nice flat spot, because that's going to go onto the front of the nose. So we have our glued nose block. Make sure we get that in the right orientation, and then we are going to be gluing that onto there like so. So that's the next step. I am just going to use Superfatic or a wood glue to glue that onto there. So just boiling up a kettle of water. This is our hatch, and we can see at the moment that the hatch needs a bit of a curve put in it. So I'm just going to hold this over, being careful not to burn myself. Just take your time with this. What we want to do is just hold that there until it cools, possibly over bend it slightly, because when it relaxes it will go back. There we go. Now I'm going to tape that in place and just leave that to dry fully. So just a bit of tape over the front, bit of tape over the back, and we'll leave that just to dry. Might as well make a cup of tea while I'm here. Right, so I've had my hatch taped down for a couple of hours while I've been off doing other things, and There you go. Now one thing I am going to do extra to this, look at that. Now what I am going to do, two things. I'm going to mark the front because there's a slight difference in the curve. I'm going to mark the front. See how that doesn't fit, so I'm going to mark the front, and then we're going to do hatch retaining. Now one last little tip, I'm happy with that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold that curve and I'm just going to run a little bit of super glue all the way down that, and that will help fix that in place. You could, if you wanted to, run a small fillet of balsa down the inside, but I think that will a little bit of cyno, just wick down the middle, that will hold that set for me. So catch. Okay, let me show you what I have done to make my hatch, because, well, hatch catch. At the moment there is currently nothing in the instructions about making a catch. So this is from the ply formers. That's going to be the tongue to go in the front, so that's going to be half glued onto there like so, and that's going to engage down into there. The other end, I have used a small rosehead burr, and I have fashioned myself, that's a washer that's going to fit into there. And on the other end I've used some of the scrap wood from around where the nose cone was, and I've popped a magnet in there. That's going to sit just here like so, and then that will then go clunk like that. Dead chuff for that. Right, so I'm now just going to sand this to shape. What I will do, a couple of little tips, is when we come to sanding this section, good idea just to wrap a bit of tape around this bit here and then sand all the way forwards, and when you're happy then put a tape around the front bit and then sand there, and that means you get a more accurate finish. But that's the fuzz done. Let's crack on with the wings. Right, so I put the plan down, gave it an iron, flattened it down, and I just used some mount spray to hold it in place. The shininess you can see is I've just run some normal sellotape over the spar and where the trailing edge is, because that's the only possibility of getting any real glue with it. So I've just done that just to protect the plan. Now, next thing we have to do is just cut ourselves out a set of ribs 1 to 14. My advice is only do one set at a time. It saves confusion and also saves you losing. So we're going to get one main spar like so, and cut the ribs out. Cut and sand the ribs out. I have cut out, sanded all my ribs. I'm now going to feed these into position, and remembering that we are going on the smaller hole, not this big hole, for that's obviously for the wing twisting. So I'm just going to feed these all on into position, and I'll show you my little technique for getting it already in place, and then we're going to add glue. The other thing you need to sort out is your trailing edge for here, and also the leading edge, but let's just get this all stuck down first, nice and square. Okay, let me just show you what I've done. I've fed all my ribs on and I've got them roughly in place. Not accurate yet because I haven't glued it. Now, a couple of tips. When you're actually feeding these ribs on, they go on very well, but my advice is when you're feeding them on, don't push from here. Literally get your hand either side and support it like so. and you're less likely to break it. You can see that I've used a little bit of blue tack just here to hold everything in place. Now what I am going to do is I'm now going to jig them up and get them absolutely where I want them, and you can see that the spar is over the line. And what I am going to do is, to make sure I've got a consistent trailing edge, I'm just going to put these couple of steel rulers on here to make sure that the trailing edges are sitting down like so, so that when I come to add the trailing edge, everything's going to fit properly. So next thing is, I'm now just going to make sure I'm happy with all of these, and then I'm going to glue them down. Also make sure that you've got rib 1 is at right angles, like so. Now I am just going to very, very quickly tack these with thin sino, just to hold them in place. You don't have to go mad. It's literally, at the moment, it's a question of just tacking them in place. Right, next step, I have tacked with thin sino all the main ribs. I have not done the interstitial ribs, and I shall show you why. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to add the leading edge like so, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the outside, and then you'll just be able to find it a lot easier to drop those in like I've just done there. Okay, so we've got the leading edge done, main spar. Now I'm adding the trailing edge. You don't glue these two ribs at the moment because we've got some sheeting to do, but I'm just going to glue the left. These are butted straight on like so, and I'm just going to glue those. And just bear in mind that this trailing edge runs right out, so I would leave this long at the moment because we're going to have to fit this wingtip. So leave the trailing edge long, and then we'll I'm going to glue all these ribs except the two outer two. So I've got the trailing edge on. I have removed it off the plan with no stickiness. I'm amazed how rigid it is already. Now the next thing we have to do is you have to sheet the undersurface first, and this is the sheet with the undersurface, remembering that this taper here is to match with the trailing edge there. So we're going to do the undersurface first, hence the reason why these are not fixed at the moment. So we have our bottom sheeting on. I've just trimmed my leading edge off now. Good little tip, just to chamfer the edge just as it fits up to the leading edge, and you get a really nice finish there. Now the next thing we've got to do is this aluminium torque rods going in. Now my advice is I would just give the edge a gentle sand that you're going to fit in. The other thing I would suggest you do, if you've got a really nice sharp knife, is just deburr the inside. Look at that, like so, because then you're going to make sure that your rod is going to fit in smoothly, and it's far better to do that now. Also check the rod, just make sure the rod fits in nicely. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to fit this all the way through like so, and that's going to go all the way to the end. Don't force it. If for any reason it's not going, stop and find out why. But that's fitting in very nicely. I'm just taking my time like so. I'm just spinning that in. There you go. Make sure that that is flush on rib number 1. It doesn't matter it's hanging out the end there, but you want this fitting nice and flush, because it will be harder to finish it later on. So that's there. I'm now going to fix that in with some medium sino, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're then going to add the top sheeting. Right, the very final thing we need to do is we need to cut out one of these with the slot. we need one of these and then one of these. These are all going to get sandwiched together, and that makes the tip. So we want to cut out this, this and that. And there we go, one wing finished. Little tip, I actually sandwiched, I trialed each piece of this 3-piece wing, got them all square, and then I sandwiched mine together, glued it, then I put it into place. But that's now ready to go. Needs sanding, needs cleaning up. Now, top tip. We have built the right wing. We've now got the other wing to build, the left wing. So let me show you something. Do that. And hopefully that will stop you making 2 wings of the same size. So my wings are all sanded up and cleaned, and is my fuselage. Now, this is where we are going slightly off kilter from the instructions, because I want to make mine full house aerobatic. So let me just show you what I've done. I want to have a moving elevator. So the standard twisty is just a fixed tailplane and a fixed rudder. The rudder attachment is going to be exactly the same. I'm basically making these notes in case anybody wants to go along with what I'm doing. What I've actually done there, let me just show you, is I've run a line either side of that slot, and that has given me the best position for this. Is the standard Pug mounting. So I'm going to mount the tailplane onto there like so. So that's going to get mounted onto the boom. The other thing I've done is, because this is going to be a moving tailplane or moving elevator, I've just cut the slots. So all I've done is I've come out 10mm either side, and I'm going to cut this angled slot here so that we get the movement and it's not going to impinge on the rudder. Now, one thing I was going to do, go completely mad stab, put a tube in it and everything. But I got to thinking, one, I want to keep the tail weight light, and the other thing I'm very interested to do is to mix the 2 aileron movements. So in other words, they're going to work in reverse. So that's up, sorry, that's down, that's up. And what I'm thinking is, I've got that massive movement in the front and I can mix that with the elevator. We might be able to get the flip overs using the mix of the wing and the tailplane. So that's why I've, for this particular model, I'm steering clear of doing the massive movements. I'm hoping to get massive movements on the elevator anyway, which we'll talk about later. So all I'm going to do now is, I haven't cut these. I'm going to sand these to aerodynamic shape first, and then I'm going to cut the rudder, which is already marked on this one, and I'm going to cut myself a decent sized elevator, and then they will be ready for covering, and then we're going to move on to installing the gear. Okay, just a quick tip here. I'm adding the front of the fin. Make sure that you've just given this a little bit of a gentle sand, because that'll, when they come out the mould, they've got a little bit of de-waxer on them. So I've got a bit of grease-proof paper here, which I found very effective, and I'm just going to pop that on there with some thick cyno. And then as it's going off, I'm just going to lift it, make sure that it's square, left and right. And then the next thing is, we're going to add this onto here. Okay, there's a little update for the tail. I have added this mounting plate, and I tell you what I did was I sat the elevator on it, hung it on the end of the bench, made sure that the fin was at 90 degrees, and I just put the tiniest little bit of thick cyno just on the edge, sat it down, and now all I've done is I've just used a little bit of this carbon twill, and I've just wrapped that round just once, and I've just wicked a bit of cyno in there, and that is not coming off. Now I think we're on to covering. Right, one last thing before we do the covering. I have just dropped my Jennings D53 metal geared servo I got from Robot Birds. I've dropped that in, I've put the spar in like so, and what we just need to make sure is we just need to measure up where the arm is going to go, and that's where our tube is going to go. So we're going to end up just adding some tube to the leading edge like so. It's going to sit on there like so, and I'm going to glue that in place before I start the covering. Right, right, bit of an update. I've had a bit of a mare. Covered the wings, no issue. So there's my wings, all done. I covered the tail surfaces, they're all ready to go. Now I added the boom. Little tip about adding the boom: I put the wing in place and then I just ran a little bit of masking tape across the top because the wing is supposed to match the fuselage. Then I literally just held that over the end of the bench, got it all in place, and then wicked it in with Sino. Now the issue I had, obviously I'm going full house aerobatics, adding another 2 servos, wasn't forward thinking. I've had to remove the top deck to be able to feed these 2 bad boys in. So I actually fed them in, got them in place, and then I got the boom in place, just being very careful. I didn't use Sino on the little plastic sleeves, I used a little bit of alphatic resin. The boom has been super glued in, and I've now fed my wires through. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover the fuselage, and then I'm on to installation. So there's going to be 2 servos here for the wings, and then the 2 servos for the elevator and rudder. Yeah, I should have thought about that a little bit more, but anyway, it came off really easily and it's gone back really nicely. So it was just, there's no way, I didn't even think about it. I was thinking, how am I going to feed those through there? So one little tip: if you're going to build this full house, make sure that you've got your cables installed before you do your top decking, or start your top decking here, get all your cables sorted, and then finish the sheeting off. Okay, one last thing I should say that I've used. I'm going to show you a picture of the servos. So for the wing servos, I'm using metal geared these are Jennings D531 metal geared. I got 2 of those from Robot Birds, and I also bought 2 of these Power HD HD13708. Now I got them from the servo shop, and let me just show you what I've got in here, and then let's get to the heels. That's the these new ones I got from the servo shop. They're the HD13708s. I got those because they fit in quite nicely. The Jennings were too big across, so I've got the 2 standard Jennings as well. So there you go. There she is, one finished Pug Twisty. She's come in at 121 grams. I'm going to find somewhere to sand that gram off, believe me. It's really annoyed me, that has. So 4 channels. I've got standard. So these, what with the Twisty, which was ailerons and pitch. At the moment I've only got these set up as aileron, because we are going to start doing some exploring in a future video on just how aerobatic we can make this, mixing these with the tail set. Elevator, I think that's enough. Now interesting enough, that's just done with a standard elevator horn and a standard servo arm. But what I did do is I made sure I got the holes, I moved right down so they're almost touching the control surface, but the hole is right over the hinge line, and that's how I've managed to get that massive movement. And then the same with the rudder, so massive rudder. So I think we'll be able to have some fun with this. So C of G, Now it's advised that the C of G is 8mm in front of the wing joiner. Sadly, checking mine at the moment, I'm about 5mm behind, which is a little bit disappointing, and I think the reason is I'm using a 500 milliamp hour single cell 3.7 volt battery, because I'm doing futile, but I literally cannot shoehorn any other battery in. I might have a plate, see what I can do, because I've got some smaller batteries, but I've got to remember I am running 4 servos here. So anyway, let's head to the hills.